Hello, I'm Kirsteen, and this is Kirsteen's Aesthetic Art and Travel. And I've basically created this YouTube tutorial to share my joy in art. So many people find out that I do art and they wish they could do some too. And I wanted to share what I've learned about that to help people do more art. And I find travel very informative for art. So every now and then I'm also going to tell you about one of the places I've been and how it's influenced my art. Today I wanted to do a tutorial on colour, and I'm calling it Not All Trees Are Brown. Not all tree trunks are brown. So, colour is interesting. A lot of people struggle with colour. I think it's very personal and emotional. There are some rules, and I do have a tutorial on the colour wheel. If you want to know what is the colour wheel and how do I use it, I have a tutorial on the colour wheel. But this one's a bit more into the subject of colour, and I'm going to use the example of drawing trees, but it applies to everything, or painting trees. So I have watercolours here. These are watercolours from Winsor & Newton, which are a good brand, not like super high-end expensive and not by any means bad quality either, and De La Rowley. They're both good, both medium good brands that you find in pretty much every art shop. And this brush is also De La Rowley, so I have medium materials. I don't really feel the need to spend a huge amount on incredibly expensive materials. Now, the classic tree that children usually draw when you give them a piece of paper and say draw a tree would be brown trunk straight from the paints, and a green sort of cloud shape for the leaves. And this is the classic tree. Colours straight from the box, and only one colour per item. So you get the brown trunk, green leaves, that's it. Now, almost nothing in the universe is only one colour per item. Even pitch dark black things start to have a range of colours. You can see the bits of pale grey on here, even though black things look more even coloured than most objects. When it comes to something like these dark blue pencils, there's practically a white line on them where the light is catching, quite in addition to the actual white end bit. Things tend to, or my brush for example, the silver on it is white, black, different greys. So things tend to have a bunch of blocks of colour that make them up. And so this kind of tree trunks are brown and leaves are green is your enemy. This kind of thinking is your enemy. Colour works best with observation or imagination. So this is not imagination, like, oh sure, I got this out of my head, I didn't look at a real tree. But I'm not imagining the colour as a different colour. So there's two ways, in my opinion, that colours work. Observation, you look at the thing and you match something very similar to what is there without getting completely neurotic about matching, because matching tends to be something people get stuck on as well. Like, it's not exactly the same. Don't worry, just make it somewhere in the range, and as long as you have light areas and dark areas, then it'll work. And the other way to do it is to be, I think this tree trunk is bright vivid blue because it works for me, and that also works well with colour. Like Picasso had a whole blue period where he painted pretty much all his paintings in blue, and they were wonderful. And he went on to paint, portraits where people had bright green noses and yellow eyes, and they were wonderful too. So either this is like, let's call this convention. It's a convention that tree trunks are brown. It's a convention that leaves are green. It's what you sort of shorten all the different variations of colour down to, because it might sometimes be the main colour of a thing. And then there's also imagination, and there's observation. So if I'm going to observe a tree, there's almost always some light hitting it from one direction or another, above, below. Most of the time when I look around, I see trees as pretty much black trunks or close to it. So if I'm going to observe a tree, I'm going to say there's light hitting it from this side, and I'll look at my tree and give it a dark side. And I'm looking at a picture of a tree here because I'm doing observation, right? I'm noticing how things are. And I'm not spending hours doing an amazing tree here. I'm just pointing out the difference between convention and observation about colour. So here we have already a vastly different kind of thing that feels much more like a work of art and less like a cartoon, or not that I'm dissing cartoons, you understand, but if you're going for something artistic that looks like a painting. And the other side of it, to me, looks a sort of buff and red. So this is my kind of buff or ochre or something like this, where the light hits it. You would describe this as a sort of brown. So I'm not saying there's never any brown, but there's never any paint box brown like this. So pretty much never. You might find a brown tree, but when I was teaching art to junior kids, I used to tell them, I'll give you £5 to go out in the school grounds and find me a completely brown tree trunk. And they'd all get electrified. Oh, the teacher's going to give us £5. We're all going to get £5. And I said, but no cheating. It has to be proper paint box brown all over. And they'd go, oh, yes, yes, yes. And then I say, okay, out you come, stay in sight of the school just on this bit of grass. And they'd run out, and there was trees all round the edge of the school grounds. And they'd stand there and they'd go, you knew, miss. You knew there's no brown tree trunks. And I'd say, yes, I knew. Because when it comes to paint box brown, it's pretty rare. So here I'm just looking and I'm picking out different colours that I'm seeing and putting them in with observation. And you can see that it's a completely different tree from the one that I've got here. Obviously, adding observation has also made me do branches rather than the classic stick. And I do think that I'm seeing some green up here among the leaves while we're on the subject of colour observation. It's much darker than that. I can just keep changing it until it works for me. And so, but the rest of the leaves to me look more like black or grey than green. A little bit of light behind it tends to look very dark underneath. And then if we were seeing the top of the tree, it'd probably be lighter, because these leaves are in their own shadow. Now, when it comes to imagination, so here we have convention, trees are brown, leaves are green. Here we have a bit of observation. I looked at a picture of a tree and I picked out some colours. And then we have imagination. So let me say, well, most of my landscape looks grey, and in the distance, the trees look kind of purple to me, so I'm going to exaggerate that. Then you come up with another way of doing it and go, here we go, here's my purpley colours, or dark blues. I'm a bit of a blue fan, so I admit that blue tends to come in to everything that I do. I'll just make this more purple by adding some red. There we go, it's much more purple, that's what I was meaning. So a kind of purpley colour with some blue in it, and then that's the dark side, so the light side needs to be lighter. I can use the colour wheel, and I can really make it zing by picking something more or less opposite on the colour wheel. So opposite blue is yellow. I do recommend you watch my colour wheel tutorial, and that'll make the whole, they're complementary colours. It means that one makes the other zing. Not that they go together smoothly, but that one makes the other zing. And as you can see, you've immediately got a really zingy tree. Or, I can say, well, this is a dark old scary painting. Life is scary. Let's make this tree trunk black and green. It's going to be much more restful as a combination. Almost always there's going to be a light side and a dark side, or the whole thing in silhouette, or have a look. It's not usually going to be one flat colour. Sure, you can all put in the comments, I saw one that was one flat colour and it was brown, and you know, be my guest. You couldn't find one. Then hint it like that. Mm-hmm. My son says this time you give him a tenner, which I won't, but yeah, I'm sure you can find one, but I'm just talking about generally to have more exciting colour. Don't look at convention. Think for yourself. Am I going to use imagination or am I going to use observation? And the trees, as you can see, these are much more interesting than this, even though they're very, very basic little paintings. So the other thing to do is I've used colours straight out of the paint box. Remember that you can mix and blend things. So I've got this on here. It's not really a flat colour, it's not even half and half. It's more like there's all sorts of texture and bits in here that make it have bark, and then texture and bits in the other side. So even within itself, the flat colour areas, it's up to you how much you break them down into individual colours, how you resolve them for yourself. You know, are they big blocks of colour? Are you getting into every detail? And the more detail you get into is entirely up to you. So again, this is an artistic decision. As I've said before, art is a dictatorship and you're the boss. And so, you know, now I'm breaking up the big colour areas and putting some dark in my light and maybe some even lighter into my dark. Here I've got Inktense pencils by Derwent, which are utter favourite of mine, and they work well in conjunction with watercolours because they're also water-based media, liquid ink that can be drawn with. So now this is bringing up more different colours into my tree. So yeah, my point is you have convention, you have observation, and you have imagination, and those are these two, in my opinion, are the good ways to tackle colour and convention, unless you're making a point. You know, this is cartoony, this is simple, this is naive, this is gonna look like a sort of motif that everyone recognises as tree, but not really in any way like a tree, or to have emotion attached to it. Then I would try and stay away from things in your head that say, oh yes, trees are brown and green. Alright, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I'm certainly not, you know, the final word on art. Your art is personal, but I'm very willing to try and help people. If you disagree with my opinions, please feel free to reject them for yourself and do what works for you. The intention behind this channel is to encourage people to enjoy art, not to dictate to people what they should think about art, which I realise is very counterproductive. And do like and subscribe and comment, because I just love it when people comment. It's very nice for me. Thank you. Bye bye.